Welcome to ProTechtion 2.0, a powerful space for connection, growth, and solutions in our ever-evolving digital world. This is where we come together as parents, educators, and community members to navigate raising children in the age of technology.
We live in a digital world. Phones, social media, constant notifications. Our children and ourselves are bombarded every single day. The pressure is real, the temptation is real, and we're all feeling it. As parents, we want the best for our children. We want them to grow up with the values of truth, integrity, and Yir Shemayim. We want them to feel safe and secure in a world that sometimes feels chaotic. But how do we protect them from the digital distractions that surround us all? We all know the importance of setting boundaries, but how do we do it without damaging our relationship with our children? How do we make sure that these boundaries are respected while still fostering trust and understanding? And how do we get the whole family on board? The truth is, we're all in this together. Schools, parents, families, communities, we can make a difference. We have the power to teach, to guide, and to support each other in creating positive change. Join us as we begin this evening on how we can navigate this digital age with intention, education, and compassion. It's not about being perfect, it's about being proactive. Together, we can help our children thrive in this world while staying connected to the values that matter most.
Welcome to ProTechtion.
Please welcome to the stage our MC, Rabbi Mendy Yuzevich, Principal of Or Menachem.
Okay, Bruchim Abayim, good evening. Thank you to all and each and every one of us that made it out here tonight. Tremendous, tremendous statement for ourselves, for our families. Very, very special to be here. And I want to begin, first of all, with a few thank yous, those that made this evening possible. Special thank you to NCFJE, to OHEL, obviously to Beis Rivka for hosting, to all the Crown Heights schools listed on the back of the booklet that are all participating and joining in this event. I'm going to begin with a short Dvar Torah, Poischim B'Dvar Malchus, and we'll get right in. It's a short program, and we have a lot to cram in. Our parsha, we have to get current. We have to live with the Zeit, live with the times. Parsha Shavua, we're in Parsha Shmois. And Parsha Shmois begins, Ve'el Shmois b'nei Yisrael abayim Mitzrayma, Eis Yaakov Yishu Beisei Bo, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, lists all the Shvatim. And interestingly enough, not only we know the Shvatim, they were all listed as those coming into Mitzrayim. So Rashi's already bothered. Why is this being mentioned again? That these are the Shvatim coming into Mitzrayim. The Medrash gives an answer that Al Shem Gulasan Shal Yisrael Nikru Kan. That the reason it's mentioning all the names, because this is listing them because they're making reference to the Geula. Mentioning these names, and they're named after different aspects of the Geula. Now, how does that explain why their names are repeated over here in a redundant way, if over here they're coming into Golos, Habayim Mitzrayim? So, a very powerful thought. The Medrash continues and says, the reason why this is connected to the Geula was because they kept their names. The fact that they kept their identity, they continued being Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, they held steadfast to who they are. That's what brought about the Geula ultimately. And it's not a simple thing. Redu Shana, 210 years to be in Mitzrayim, to hold on to your identity. And it says, Leishinu Eshmam L'Shainim U'Levushim. And I want to describe what our identity is and what we strive to ensure the identity of our families look like. It says, Leishinu Eshmam L'Shainim U'Levushim. They didn't change their names, their tongue, their language, and their levushim, their garb, the way they see their style of dress. And the question is, we know definitely throughout the entire Golos that every place that Yidden went, they definitely adapted the style of the levushim. We know that, I'm sure they wore robes in Mitzrayim, and they weren't wearing down hats in Poland. It came from here. And L'Shainim as well, they definitely were speaking Arabic. And they were speaking, and Al-Qan, if it wasn't then, throughout all the years of Golos, they have changed their Lashon. That's not what we're referring to. Our identity is the extra Edelkeit. That in their levush, they made sure that they maintain the edelkeit in the levush. They didn't wear clothing the way a guy wears clothing. They didn't speak in a prosta way, even if you're talking in that language. And you should know that this is already the embodiment and the beginning of the Geula. That's what, from coming into Galus, they have already begun their Geula in terms of standing above the Metzias around them. And this is really what we strive for as Chassidim, that are zeicha to live in the Rebbe's Shchuna, which the Rebbe calls Kansi V'Hashem Es HaBracha, to maintain with clarity the sensitivity the Rebbe wants us to have, the level of edelkeit, in the style of talking, style of dress, and obviously shmam, which is also our identity. If we see ourselves as chassidim and see ourselves as those that are zeicha to be einwohner, to be living in the Rebbe's community, in the Rebbe's streets, where the Rebbe walked, the Rebbe breathed, the Rebbe gave the whole world vitality, the gift of his Torah and the gift of the light of Chassidus. We have the schus to rise to the occasion and have the koiches. This event is going to be a lot about struggles. But it's important to remember this, and we're going to see, they're going to be reflected in the questions. People are asking real-life questions from the Metzias in front of them. And we're lucky to have such a panel, as I'll introduce in a few moments. What I do want to point out why this Dvar Torah is important to me as an introduction is because even when we have struggles, such as the questions that are going to come up, it's always, you can't make the life about the struggle. And it can't be your relationship with the child all about this. You have to have an identity. You have to be passionate about who you are. And then from within that space, you can deal with the issues. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's easier said than done. But that's the Dvar Torah. That's the law of order. And from that space, Be'ezus Hashem, the Eibishter helps us when we see ourselves as a neshama, we see ourselves as a chassid, we see ourselves as where we're living. We strive to maintain the edelkeit, the aver of kedusha, of Limud Torah in our homes. From that space, we have to be on the ground, and we're going to deal with the questions, the real life questions that come up. It's my before I introduce one last thing I was asked to remind. This booklet should not be taken for granted. This itself is a gift that you hold close to your heart. It's not a liquid of different type of filters. It may have that as well. It's real tips and maybe even apps that can help you not only guard, but also organize yourself, limit maybe technology, aids, suggestions for how to maintain a sane life in such a stormy world. This is a real handbook. In addition, you can find on one of the pages, very important for us in Crown Heights, we have our own place where you can make your filter. Obviously, you can go to other communities if you have different, their benefits. Each one has their milas. But till now, people would say we don't have one in our community. It's not accessible. That does exist. It's on 399 Kingston Avenue in Schus Reb Shmuel Pevsner. So that's super important. And please, in the back of this booklet, you also have a place to write notes. There are going to be invaluable information shared this evening by our very esteemed panelists. And please jot them down. There's a pen near you. This is what you're taking home. In addition, there are on your seats important index cards to utilize. When you have a question, please jot it down. We're going to go through first the questions that were messaged to us in advance, but we will get to these. We'll collect them, and I'll try to get to many of them. Please try to write clear, so I'll have an easier time. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce each of our esteemed panelists with a little bio, after which they're going to have 5 minutes to share with us their opening thoughts, as well as in the end, their closing statements. So, our first esteemed panelist, and I'll preface, we have with us a tremendous, respected mechanech. We're going to have with us a therapist, which is going to bring his experience to the table, and a tech director, which will bring his invaluable knowledge to each and every question we have before us. And now, let's move on to Rabbi Mendel Blau. serves as the Rosh Moisid of Olei Torah, bringing extensive leadership experience and a deep dedication to Chinuch al Taras HaKodesh. He's committed to fostering an educational environment where every Talmud, from preschool through Beis Medrash, can thrive and grow. Before assuming his current role, Rabbi Blau served as the Manal of Chayvei Torah for 10 years, as a Magachir in Olei Torah Masifta for 5 years, building meaningful and lasting relationships with Talmidim and their families. If I could add, off the script, Rabbi Blau has children throughout the entire gamut of the system, and he's Imoy Anoichi. He's together with each and every one of us. He has children growing up in this community from the youngest grades throughout the entire system and beyond, which brings a tremendous amount of real life to what we're about to hear. So give us your 5 minutes, and then we'll do the next.
Okay, thank you. First of all, special thank you for everyone that came out. If I can comment just one thing before I start, I think Rabbi Zevich gave a beautiful opening, but just one remark, if I can say. He said, like, tonight, a night of talking about struggles. I would really want to reframe it. I hope that it would turn out to be true, that it will be a night of solutions and resolutions. In other words, I would hope that we can, frame things to try to stay solution-oriented. The struggle, I think we all know. So, like on the ProTechtion thing, they wrote, there's going to be reflect, connect, protect. A lot of us have been reflecting about this for as long as the internet has entered our community. But I think if we can more connect and come up with solutions for protection, to protect, that would make the evening meaningful and worthwhile of everyone's time. The other thing that I want to just open up, and I think it's obvious, and it's going to be somewhat of a challenge, is that we're engaged in a very nuanced conversation. It is much easier to engage and provide clarity when everything is black and white, one size fits all. The nature of this conversation, and part of the reason why I think it's helpful to have a panel and to hear different perspectives, but it's also helpful to clarify certain parts in the question, is that a lot of things change. There's a lot of variables over here, and what's true for some ages is not true for other ages. What is true for one home environment may not be true for another home environment. And then in the solutions as well, there are so many details that sometimes can seem overwhelming, and I hope that, with some conversation and with everyone taking some time to educate themselves, it becomes less of this like daunting thing that goes over many people's heads. You have filters, you look at the booklet, and in the beginning you open up the booklet, and I believe for a lot of people that aren't techie, it's somewhat overwhelming of there's this type of filter, there's a filter you can put on the home, and there's a device type of filter, and there's time restrictions, and then there's so many different particular questions that parents, sometimes we talk about the smartphone, which is the personal device that a child has. Other times we're talking about general technology in the family. What about the home computer? Or more particular, on the home computer, specific questions related to content that's more, call it addictive, but I don't mean the word addictive, but there are so many details that I think it's hard to capture everything, but I hope that we'll be able to provide some solutions. I'll mention some other things that come up often when I hear from parents. Some parents ask questions, in other words, what should be the email policy? Do I give my kids an email box of their own? Do I not? Do I monitor it? MP3 devices, MP4 devices, smart watches, are they as innocent as they look? Are they not? But I think again, let me just go back to one piece that I hope is that sometimes what I find when engaged in these conversations is that there's two types of reactions. There's a certain amount of people that are living with a healthy dose of denial. And you talk to a parent will say, no, my child, not possible. It's not possible. I'll give a smartphone to my 5th grader. I trust them with my eyes closed. Okay? We can get to that. And then you have the other type, which is apparent that there is so much anxiety around this issue and trust and allowing them to be in a trusting relationship with their children or with themselves, that I think that sometimes gets in the way to be able to have a healthy relationship and a healthy conversation that's open, that's respectful, that's trusting. So a lot of it is not just, this solution or that solution, but it's the way we go about and our approach, trying to balance it in, kind of being honest, ready to be honest, without being overly anxious. I would want to take one more minute, and I know no one came out for a shir, but I want to take 1 minute to share a letter of the Rebbe on the topic of television. The letter recently surfaced. It's not printed in Igros Kodesh, but I think the letter is so insightful, as long as we can give it the right context and framework, that I think the letter is worth every minute. The Rebbe wrote, the letter is written to a Av Beis Din in the city of Manchester. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Goldich. And Rabbi Yitzchak Goldich reached out to the Rebbe in the year of Tavshin Tezayin, asking the Rebbe whether he should join a Kol Koira. A Kol Koira, if anyone is not familiar, is those big signs that come out with like straight black and white bands. And black and white, I mean not just the printed form, but the pun intended. It's black and white, this is kosher, this is treif. So he was asked to join a Kol Koira that would make it black and white about the approach to television. And he's asking the Rebbe, what does the Rebbe think about him joining that? Now I want to give one quick introduction. For every Lubavitcher, we're all familiar how much the Rebbe spoke against bringing the television into the house. How much the Rebbe, there's even a story with Reb Nissen Emenov, that Reb Nissen Emenov was asked to be a sandik by one of his balabatim in Bernois. And Reb Nissen said, you have a TV, I'm not ready to be sandik in your house. So the balabas was ready to do anything to have Reb Nissen be a sandik. So the balabas said, I'll take it out for you. So they took the TV and they brought it into the storage room of yeshiva. They took it out of the house. Someone was very proud about this move. Reb Nissen Emenov standing up for his principles, and this balabas that was ready to take the TV and put it out of his house. And they wrote to the Rebbe, they thought this would give the Rebbe a sense of nachas ruach. Immediately, the Rebbe, without waiting for the regular line, the Rebbe had Rabbi Chadakov call the yeshiva to say, get the television out of the storage room of yeshiva. That was the Rebbe's approach. Now I say that as an introduction, so in other words, the Rebbe almost looked at the television like something that was black and white, chazer treif, does not belong in the house of a Yiddish, does not belong in a Yiddish home, doesn't belong in the storage room of a yeshiva, even temporarily, when it's being done from a good intention. At the same time, you would imagine that Yitzchak Goldich would get a letter from the Rebbe saying, sure, go ahead, sign the Kol Koira, ban the television. Everyone should know, you're never allowed to have a television in the house. The Rebbe writes to him as follows, and I'm just going to share a few points of the short letter. The Rebbe discourages him. The Rebbe says, I don't want to openly talk about my discouragement for this letter, because I'm going to stay local only to those reaching out for advice. But the Rebbe says, number one, when Rabbanim come out and ban something in black and white terms, when the issue is much more nuanced, says the Rebbe, people today don't take direction when you ban something black and white without properly establishing why it's usher. The Rebbe then talks about the fact that there isn't really, if you're going to take the approach that any device that can lead to Isser has no place in a Yiddish house, the Rebbe says there isn't much difference between the radio and the television, other than the fact that the television is putting visuals to all of the other audio things. So if you're going to come out with a Kol Koira about the television, are you ready to come out with a Kol Koira about the radio, which is in every house? The Rebbe then says that he believes that the television, the only reason why it's not as widespread adopted as the radio was simply because of a price impediment. So the Rebbe says, in other words, his prediction is if you're going to leave things to the natural course, more and more people are going to be taking this. Now the Rebbe was writing to the community of Manchester. I don't know much about his community. But the Rebbe goes ahead and says that when the Rebbe adds another piece, that when a Rav comes out and makes something that isn't black and white, but turns it into black and white, he now loses the faith and trust of the community, that when he has something that is black and white, they no longer trust. They don't know. Is this the gray that became black, or is this one actually black? So the Rebbe then therefore says, in my opinion, don't sign this Kol Koira. Shocking. But the Rebbe finishes off with an important paragraph. Move on shekol hanal, eine shoylal hadibur vatamula balpeh. A campaign and a conversation has to be held with any community that is open to have that conversation. Shaloi lahachlis m'chaynazu. This device doesn't belong in the house. Why? Because it is causing people to be nichshal b're'iyas with re'iyas asuris. So what you see from the letter in short is we have to be careful what we answer as black and white, but at the same time, that's not a reason to surrender and take things lying down. We have to have this conversation. I will only finish off, not to mislead anyone, that this letter in no way is here to suggest that it isn't black and white about giving a child in 5th grade or in high school an unrestricted smartphone. The Rebbe is talking here to adults, and this goes to the first point of the conversation, that we have to be ready to look at things in the full context, framework, and all its nuances.
Rabbi Blau, a lot to think about. Our next panelist we're going to introduce is Dr. Shalom Augenbaum, the renowned therapist and the clinical director at Tikva, division of OHEL, where he provides therapy, trains therapists, and educates Jewish community on parenting, on relationships, and on addiction. His first book, Inside Outside Parenting, Understanding Your Child's Needs, Nature, and Personality, is available for purchase after the event, and his second book, Divorced, is coming out later this year.
Thank you. To remarks your Dvar Torah, I just wanted to say that I remember reading, it's very well known that the Rebbe was very good friends with Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University. The Rebbe accorded him a lot of respect. And Rabbi Yoshe Ber once recollected his time. They were actually together in Berlin. They attended Berlin University. And he says, when he was speaking about the Rebbe during that time, he was the only one in the entire university that wore his hat, his jacket. He retained the tzura that you were talking about before. I feel that's really apropos. To the other thought that you were talking about at TV, it reminded me of a story that Ruchama Shane writes in her book, famous book, All for the Boss, where I believe it was Baruch Ber, one of the great Rosh Yeshivas of Kamenetz, when he came to America to fundraise for his yeshiva, he was staying by one of the balabatim, put him up in a house, and he came out, I guess, after a night's sleep, and in the living room, he had to pass from the kitchen to the living room. I guess the host's daughter was watching television. This is going back the early days of America when I guess the TV was just brand new. And you have to understand Reb Baruch Ber is the Rosh Yeshiva of Kamenetz. He was not a simple person. And he would not pass because he was worried that it would get in the way of this child's viewing entertainment, and he didn't want to interrupt her. When the host saw that Reb Baruch Ber was waiting, he didn't want to get it in her line of vision. He quickly ran to turn off the TV, and Reb Baruch Ber said, better not to insult another person's feelings. Turn off the television and make her feel bad. So I just wanted to, the Gedolim, the great ones, knew how to take situations that seemed to us to be black and white and approach it with Torah. Anyway, I am really, really humbled to be here. As a matter of fact, I feel a little bit out of place. Telling my panelists that when you introduced an educator and Rav, therapist, I was wondering if anyone could guess who's who. Anyway, but I remember the wise words of the great historian and Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Beryl Wein, who once said that once the door has been opened for the great, and even the small may enter. And so here I am sitting in front of you today. I want to just thank Rebbitzin Sarah Blau and Dr. Carleen Amber for granting me and the opportunity to sit here and talk to you a little bit. And I asked the Ribbono Shel Olam to grant me the wisdom and the words as we begin this conversation about the super important topic of parenting and technology. I was also asked to mention this in public, that I'm speaking through a grant that we at OHEL have with the UJA called In It Together, which supports parents and their children in navigating mental health challenges. So with your permission, I'm good to go? I have still 5 minutes? Okay. I'm going to make it, I'll make it short. Okay, I'll be respectful of everyone's time. With your permission, I just want to begin with an honest acknowledgement. My name is Dr. Shalom Morgenbaum, and I have an unfiltered smartphone, and I make significant use of the internet. My children, Shmuel and Rivka, do not. For the last 20 years or so, I live in a community which, broadly speaking, sees the internet as evil at its foundation. Internet in this context really is viewed as a loaded gun. And so, at best, having internet is kind of like playing the game of Russian roulette, where there's always an opportunity for extreme damage, and therefore this community feels it should be completely prohibited if we had the choice. It is important to recognize that each of us, and the reason why I'm sharing this is because each of us approaches as individuals, as families, and as communities, we approach technology with our own unique starting point. And so as I share my perspective, and as the other panelist shares theirs, I encourage you to filter what is going to be said here tonight through your own experiences, your own values, your own family, community dynamics. My approach may not fully align with yours, and that is okay. The conversation isn't about, at least in my opinion, about imposing a single standard. Rather, it's just to give you tools and insights, help you navigate your relationship with your child and where technology fits into that. So my advice to you is to discriminate wisely. I have more to say, but I want to be mindful, so it's pretty important, though, so maybe I'll get back to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. We're here for another while, so. Reb David Churba, Director of Tech in Flatbush, also the founder, the recognized expert in technology with over a decade of experience advising families and community leaders on safe and effective technology use. He works closely with communities in Brooklyn, Lakewood, Los Angeles, Toronto, raising awareness about the challenges and solutions that technology presents. Having grown up in Brooklyn and taught for 15 years in yeshiva at Yeshiva Mosdos, brings a deep understanding of both of chinuch and chinuch world and the complexities of modern technology, which allows him to help families strike the right balance in managing their technology use. Each year, Tech Flatbush supports approximately 7,000 families in navigating these challenges. David.
Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight to speak. I hope I could do the right job. I could just tell you off the record, today I had a couple questions that I wasn't prepared for, so I'll just share them with you. My first mother came in, said I have Life 360, I want to be able to track my child, but he's in a yeshiva, he could only have a flip phone. What do I do? The next question I had today was, my child is calling 1-800 numbers. I don't like it. How do I restrict the phone that it could only call out a certain amount of numbers? And to both of these questions, with all my experience for the past 13 years, I didn't have an answer on the spot. Here you go. This is what you got to do. But Baruch Hashem, I was able to honestly give them the proper answers, but questions always arise, even even very good and healthy techie people cannot always have the right solution in every situation. So the idea is really to ask and to understand where we're going and what we're doing. What I do find is, and this is the question of the night, how to navigate relationships with parents and children. So I want to say 2 points just to start, that I'm a big believer we have to fight technology with technology. We want to make sure that something is safe. You got to use a program, a software to actually do that. Another thing is that we want to make parents aware that it's all about holding out your children as long as possible. And struggles in between, yes, we have to work it out, but the concept is to be a winner in this game of protecting your children. The question is, how far can we get them as long as possible to be in the better place at the better time? So, Mr. Hashem, with the question in, we would like to try to answer.
Mr. Koyach Reb David. Okay, as we move on towards the main part of the evening, the questions, I want to say it's important to note and to realize that these questions are real life questions. There are people out there hurting. It's very possible that many of the reason this evening didn't take place until tonight for many years is because it's hard to address questions when you feel sometimes the question is coming from a spot that maybe they shouldn't have got there. It's not the standard. It's hard to address publicly maybe. And the truth is that there's never a time to judge another Yid. And, chinuch is a time to daven. Our children have friends. Our children have their own experiences where they go. And we have to daven always for siyata d'shmaya. But I think it's for everybody, wherever you stand. We have our parents that are parents of children in preschool. We have parents, teens, and we have parents that are grandparents. We have all different, and from all different shades and grades. Every question here is a real life question. Are people that are really searching for answers and are in a very, that's what I meant earlier when I said struggling. I didn't mean, obviously we're looking forward to having solutions, but understanding where these questions are coming from is super important when there's a question addressed that may not apply to you or you have your own thoughts on the subject. One last thing I would just want to add to what the doctor mentioned about not having a filter. Doctor mentioned that you should make sure, like, check in with, make your decision based on your experiences, etc. Another very important one is your das Torah, is your Rav, because this is, like everything in our life, a halachic question. In our community, I don't know, every community has their Rabbanim. In our community, I don't know of any Rabbanim that allow adult to have a phone without a filter, and they've been spoken very clearly about it. That doesn't mean anything for your community, and for you, obviously, but for us as Siddim and as Nash in Crown Heights and Chabad communities, based in Eretz Yisrael, went as far as building their own filter. So make sure to take your Das Torah in account. I do want to point out, not everyone has the specific filter. I'm sure there are, there's other ways to do it. You could close your browser, have it email someone else. There's so many options, but run it by your Rav. Okay, so the first question, I think I'm going to address to Dr. Augenbaum. Dr. Augenbaum, how do we establish boundaries in technology without hurting our relationship with our children?
Excellent question. How do we establish boundaries with our children regarding technology without threatening the... So a couple of things. This is really what there are some fundamentals which I think are really important that I think lay the groundwork. The first is, I think you touched on it before, we often see this as technology as a threat. And the first thing that we have to do as parents, if we're approaching our relationship, is understand that our mindset is going to guide our responses or reactions. And so if we see something as a threat, that part of our brain is automatically going to react as such. We're going to either be offensive or defensive, and we're going to react instead of respond. And so what I usually like to tell parents is the first thing is to take a very deep breath, to change the word threat to challenge. If you see something as a challenge, it's a little bit softer. It gives you the ability to say, hey, what are some of the solutions that I could use in order to approach this very, very fundamental question? How, if at all, does technology get in the way or impact my relationship with my child? The other thing, another fundamental, is that chinuch, education, parenting, always contains two aspects. And this is really important because I've seen hundreds of people and they forget this aspect. Chinuch contains in it, we're trying to educate our children for the now, so they could be good kids right now. And it's also for the future. And if you're lucky, the education that you pour in, the zoyrim b'dima, we see the results now and we see them as it grows up. Oftentimes, you'll have parents that'll come in and they'll do everything that they can to educate their child. And their child will go through elementary school, they'll be the perfect child. All of a sudden something happens and it's like, what happened to my child? It appears like an alien. And sometimes you'll have the reverse, where you'll put in all of your time and effort, and they challenge you throughout their childhood and teenage years. Later, as adults, that's when the chinuch kicks in. I'm sure we all had the experience. We are 25 years later, you say, that's what my parents meant. Now they're right. That's chinuch. And so it's important to understand, this is a concept from the 12 steps, time takes time. It may be challenging now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the efforts and the time that you're putting in presentations, etc., will at some point pay off dividends. Don't judge is another one. I'm happy you mentioned that. This is really important. There's a famous saying in the 12th step in the rooms. Be careful judging that drug addict so harshly. They may just recover and be the one who can show your very own child a way out one day. Technology, its supreme presence, enforces its way in every single family. The best of families. I have met people that hold very, very high and esteemed positions, and it really doesn't discriminate. So I ask, as the questions come in and in your own life, it's very quick. We as humans, that is what we do. We judge. Don't judge. With regards to the other very important thing is siyata d'shmaya. You're going to hear a lot of solutions tonight. Fighting technology with technology is beautiful. You're going to hear psychological insights. You're going to hear chinuch insights. Don't undervalue or underuse the power of tefillah and siyata d'shmaya. We need it, but we also need education. Famous psychologist Dr. Chaim Ganot was asked, well, if you have siyata d'shmaya, what do you need education for? He quickly answered, so as not to spoil the siyata d'shmaya. So education is important. We don't want to mess up whatever the divine providence is. With regards, let me get now to the actual question. The first thing is to understand the formula of parenting. Formula of parenting is the balance, the sweet spot between love and limits. Chazal already addressed this. The Gemara in Saita gives us the equation, smol doicha uyamin mikareves. While the left hand pushes away, the left hand is usually the weaker one, that's discipline, it's less forceful, right? You draw in with love and connection. And it emphasizes that limits are important. Discipline is important because it creates structure. You have to keep the connection and the love strong. What does left-hand parenting look like? Disciplined parenting look like? It's what we call in psychology authoritative, not authoritarian. What's authoritarian? Some of you may have grown up like that. That feels like you're living under a drill sergeant. It's like when a child asks why, the parent says, because authoritative is firm, it's assertive, but at the same time takes the child's perspective into account. It sets boundaries and it sets limits, but it also says you are loved. And there are reasons for this, and I will share it with you. Right-hand relationship, the yamin, what does that look like? Warmth is everything. There's a famous saying that rules without relationship will lead to rebellion. Kids need to feel that when they struggle, when they mess up, and when they really mess up, all caps, they feel safe and secure to come to the parent and to talk to them about it. If they sense that your love is unconditional, they're more likely to respect your guidance, even if they don't agree, particularly with technology. And lastly, also very important, lead by example. If you want your kids to be a model for use technology effectively, then they have to see it from the parent. There was a study conducted in 1975 by a British psychologist by the name of John Rushton. And what he did was, he had a game where little kids were given coins. And they were told, you know, you could give these coins that you have for yourself, you could give them to someone that is a little bit more needy than you are, someone that's poorer or impoverished. And what he found across the board was that the biggest predictor of whether a child kept the coins for themselves or gave it away was dependent on the person, the adult, who explained the rules to them. Whether that person was a charitable person or a selfish person. Regardless of what the adult told them to do, the child reacted based on what they saw and how the adult acted, not what the adult said. There's a question here, and I think it underlines all the questions that are going to come up. There seems to be a fear of hurting the relationship with our children. I just want to speak one more minute about this because this is really important. It is not always easy to raise a child in balanced technology. They will cry, they will scream, they will tantrum. If they're older, as teenagers, stonewall you, they may run away. They really put up a lot of resistance. However, and this is coming from over close to 15 years of experience dealing with certainly teens, I will tell you that every single teen, whether they acknowledge it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not, there is a part of them that crave safety, security, rules. They want to be disciplined. They put up a really good fight, and they make you feel like, no way. But I will tell you that deep down, they do. The Medrash tells us, Yasa bincha ki yesh tikva, you should discipline your child for there is hope. Yal hamito, when they protest, when they scream, when they yell, tisa nafshecha, do not allow your soul to be swayed. And the Medrash says on that something that is mind-blowing to Western society. The Medrash says that the more one disciplines one's child, the more the child will love their parent. So, what I'd like to say is as follows. I've done an anecdotal research study, which was also, I heard that there's a therapist out in LA that did this as well. She asked teenagers, hey, listen, when you're a parent and you have teenage children of your own, how will you handle their use of digital technology different than your parents did with you? And more than half of the teens, and by me it's roughly the same, maybe almost all, responded that they would be more restrictive with their own children than the parents were with them. Right? Rashi tells us, a famous Rashi, he says, Kol haschalos kashos. He introduces this psychological concept that every beginning is difficult, and I'll end with this. And someone once asked, Kol haschalos kashos? Beginnings, it should just say kol haschala kasha. All beginning, when you start something, it's hard. The answer is when you're trying to engage in something new, you're trying to implement a change in the family system, trying to limit something which was, let's say, unfettered or unrestricted up until now, trying to introduce something to your child when all of their friends seem to have something different. Going to be many, many beginnings because you start and you're going to fail, and then you'll start again, and then you'll fail. You're consistent, and you keep trying. Even if you fail, ultimately you're going to. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
To add, David, Mendel.
Very, very well said. Very insightful. So I would tell you, using technology, you really don't have so much conflict with the child when you're using technology to protect technology, because without having any protection on a device, the child is either locked in the bathroom room, not coming to the dinner table, on the couch, can't get them off, can't get them to sleep, and every part of that child is a struggle. But when you're implementing proper limitations, downtime, app limits, filters, whatnot, that child is already like locked up, so to speak, where yes, okay, 11 o'clock, my phone turned off, I better get back into bed, there's nothing else for me to do. You don't need a mother yelling upstairs, hey, why are you not sleeping already? You don't need to have that conflict. So with the proper implementation of technology to protect that child, then you are really solving 90% of the battle. The hard part with the relationship comes when the child is sitting with the parent, initially setting up those limitations. Now, if you do that early on, when they get that device in the first place, then you have, again, very easy way to just, go right into limitations. If it's something that the child had access for a long time, and now we're starting limitations, then you're talking about different types of struggles. I want Snapchat, and mommy says I can't have Snap. I want TikTok. No, you can't have TikTok. So when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of the more sensitive applications, that's where there's going to be struggles. However, there are ACEs.
The crux of what we're going to deal with is how to have that discussion at different points, if it's beginning or later. Anything else, Rabbi? Just a minute.
I think Reb Shalom answered a very full, comprehensive answer. Just to add, the obvious is that there's the question comes up a lot when it comes to maybe technology, because it becomes like almost see it like a very challenging thing, and not everyone knows how to have the conversation. But in essence, it's really just part of all the skills that all of us as parents need to learn when you're setting any boundaries with your children, whether it's what time you want them home at night, whether how many hours they can be out playing with friends on the block, or bath routines and bedtimes, all of these things, there needs to be a healthy relationship and then a healthy amount of discipline. So a few points just to add is that I do believe that all of us as parents need to think about how much are we investing in general in that relationship. And I'll share personally, I remember goes back some time ago, when there was a certain challenge with one of our children, and we went to speak to someone, Charav, Shpia, whoever it is they're going to speak to, a therapist. Each person, it's kedai, sometimes you get an outside opinion. And one of the things that was just so simple to do and so valuable, the person asked, how often do you take your child out for personal time? How often do you do? I was like, oh, what's that? Again, maybe it's like even embarrassing that I'm saying it. Maybe to everyone else it's so obvious. But I was like, I spend so much time every supper, every bedtime. I lay down with my child. Okay, most of us are raising more than one child. How often do we take one child out for personal time and give them something to feel special? Those are little things where we invest in a relationship. And, in general, they say, sometimes they use the 80-20 rule. When a person has a strong relationship, it can handle a little bit of friction. If there's 80% deposits and there is a relationship, then it can handle a little bit of critique, a little bit of boundaries and rules. When there isn't a relationship, there isn't a healthy relationship, so then, yeah, the child feels like, okay, all my parent does is gets in my way, tells me, don't do this, do this. So just a general thing is, all of us can not just for technology, but for the sake, it has so many benefits. Just think about ways to build up their relationship with each child, and different children need different things. For one child, going out for personal time could be just to talk. For other children, they almost don't want to talk to you. They want the pizza and the ice cream. But you know what? They feel special. They know that they're getting that personal time and that personal touch. It's very valuable. And the last point to Shalom's thing is, and Rabbi Sherba spoke about it as well, it helps to start early, but it matters a lot the age of the child. So when you're resetting, and Dr. Orgenbaum spoke about, don't be spoiled from the initial resistance. But I do believe that we need not be spoiled, but you need to go in with your eyes open. And if you have a 19-year-old son at home or a 19-year-old daughter, and you're going to come home tonight and say, okay, we're resetting, right? We're having a discussion. We needed to talk. We're talking about the smartphone. Think about it. Strategize. If you sense that your situation has certain things that you're going to encounter, some friction, strategize. Reach out to Naseh L'Charav, reach out to a friend, reach out to whoever can give you guidance. But plan that well, because it could go down south.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing, I'm sorry. Just to add to this, when you're going out with your child one-on-one, the point is not to bring your cell phone. They did a research study where they asked parents, do you think your children are spending a lot of time on cell phones? And the parents, it was about 60% said, yes, our children spend too much time on cell phones. And they asked children, do you think your parents spend too much time on their cell phones? Close to 80% said our parents spend too much time on cell phones. There is a term that was coined. It's called continuous partial attention. This was coined by Linda Stone, who was an exec at Microsoft and Apple and a researcher. And what she found is that if a cell phone is even on the table and it's off, part of your brain is already thinking about the cell phone and you are not fully present. And so people today are continuously in a state of partial attention. So if you're going out with your child and you have your cell phone, even if it's on the table or you're just checking it periodically, number one, you're not fully present. Number two, and here's the kicker, is that your child or the other person doesn't perceive that you are being compassionate and empathic to them. So this comes up with therapists that have cell phones in their rooms and they're sitting with their patients. Really not a good look. People are paying you good money and they're perceiving that you're just not fully present. Teachers, rebbeim, etc. Anyway, I just wanted to add to that.
Thank you again. Thank you, Reb Shalom, as well. As a moderator, my job is to keep it moving, but there's nothing I would cut out of this discussion. I think we'd rather be here for longer and take it all in. Just to recap, getting threatened by the challenge, as Reb Shalom said, it's that being threatened won't lend itself to the relationship. Discussed, as well as Bechlal, how to set boundaries is much more about being authoritative. It's crave structure, as Reb David said. Expanded on beautiful. Thank you. And the next question I'm going to pose to Remendel Blau. How do we establish boundaries in technology without How can I explain to a teen, and this actually also relates to what Reb David brought up, how do I explain to a teen about not getting a phone or limitations on technology, time, content, in a way that he can appreciate it at her level of maturity? So let's say we're having the conversation, the child never had a phone yet. How can I explain it when they going to add some wording, my friends, my neighbors, always me? What kind of words can you?
Okay, so the easiest thing, what a lot of parents crave, and to a degree rightfully so, and maybe later talk about it, as parents often reach out to us and say, I wish the school will take a stronger stance, because then I can just tell my child, your school doesn't let. I would love to give it to you. Your school doesn't let. And there's validity to that point, and it does help tremendously when parents could lean on policies of school or community policies. But I think parents also, in other words, getting clarity for themselves and explaining things to children. So I have to picture, in other words, what age child are you talking to? Are you talking to a 7th grader that wants to get his own phone? What does he need the phone for? I'll try to address it. I'll share something. I had one of my children, and I hope he might be watching this, right? Just admitted.
Watching it.
I just admitted that I have technology at home. I do, and with safeguards, we can talk about it. But one of my children was pretty young and wanted a phone, very strong. So I wanted to learn, in other words, like what is it? Does he want a phone because he saw his friends have a phone, because the older Bachram that he looks up to has a phone? But with some conversation, relationship, what I really learned, and it was maybe not so easy for him to initially admit, is that there was a certain amount of fear that he had walking home from Yeshiva Serev by night. On Maple Street, and you have to cross a certain street, and sometimes there's hangouts. Whatever it is, you can call it fear, anxiety, whatever it is, and I mean it only in a positive way, but these are normal things, challenges that the Eibishter gave each one of us. And so what I learned in his case, in other words, where it's coming from, that there is a certain need that he needs. He needs to feel that he can call me, right, and be on the phone with me if he feels scared. Or just like the Gemara sometimes says, pas pasali, just having something reassures you he could flip a dial and call for help. Did someone ever approach him? Did someone ever attack him? Never. But he needed security. I felt as a parent valid. It was valid. We didn't say he needs it. I can speak to him today to tomorrow, and we do try to expand whether those fears are realistic, whether they're really. But I felt that it was, in this case, valid, give him the phone. So then I looked for the best way. How do I give him a phone that I don't have to be concerned, that I don't have to start being anxious about? So one of the things that we came up with, and again, I'm not saying it's the ultimate solution, but at the time what we came up with was the Apple smartwatch linked to the parents' parental controls. So what it did is it gave him a phone that he wouldn't lose. It was linked and somewhat limited, right? There was no Siri on it. There was other things that weren't on the device. It really just did call and gave him the ability to text. It did it. His older brother didn't necessarily care to have a phone. So my point is, my first place is before you sometimes people, they have an answer like, okay, give me the words how to say no. Before it's no, and I'm not here to say tonight everything is permissive and yes and no. Sometimes there is a place to say no. And there's a lot of times a place to say no, but before we're just looking, give me the words for my answer, listen to the scenario and learn the scenario before you decide. Now, when it comes, let's just say to an older child, say to an older child is challenging you, why is filters important? Why do you need filters? You don't trust me? So, a few points. Number one, that I believe, and again, with all respect to Dr. Augenbaum, and really, I say that very genuinely, I do believe that there are times that we can explain to our children, okay, there's a difference between children and adults. Children don't have licenses, adults have licenses. There's a certain maturity needed in order to drive. When you're an adult, you can also have a phone without filters. There's also, though, a value, and we all agree, I know that we all, there's also a value sometimes when children see that their parents are genuine, that it's not coming from a place of, you're the little child, I can control you, I don't trust you, I'm the parent, I get to set the rules. But they see a parent that's also working on themselves, that also has standards for themselves. They have filters. And it's also okay to explain why we have filters. You know, for all of us in Yiddishkeit, we're very familiar with the concept of Yichud. Now, if you think of the concept of Yichud developed for many years, I'm talking about the non-Jewish world, well, what's Yichud? You don't trust. Is this guy so perverted that he can't be let for X? Unfortunately, and I don't want to get into the detail, right? But the Me Too movement exposed that human condition is much more vulnerable than what we want to let on to be honest and trust. The Rambam says that there were many Gedolei HaChachamim that were careful even in secluding themselves with someone of the same gender. Or Gedolei HaChachamim that said, put some boundaries in place even, in other words, in their own home. And they were demonstrating to their children that we have human vulnerabilities. Human vulnerabilities, and the solution to many of these things is to put in appropriate safeguards. Now, I don't know that I would have this, again, everything age appropriate. Certain children are old enough to have this conversation, to explain them this concept of asu siag la Torah. In order for Torah to be preserved, there needs to be safeguards in place, and it definitely makes it easier when they know that their parent also has safeguards and their parent also works on certain things. Certainly makes it easier to understand. But again, in the particular, some of these questions, I have to think, what age child are we talking about? What does the conversation look like? Because so many things will change, and we have to be able to answer appropriately according to the situation and conditions.
Being that the question, I'm assuming, like Rabbi Blau is saying, it's a question that's directed for a child the first time and a regular child. So let's assume he's a child in the Maistis. It really, if you're proud of the Maistis, you're proud of the fact that you're sending him to the Rebbe's yeshiva that's educating him in the line of the Rebbe and Rabbi Seinu Sienu, it is very in place. Again, I'm not talking about a child that's struggling. Initially, Reishis Darkoi, how the Rebbe perceives a boy, Bacher and Tomchei Tmimim, a boy that's in a yeshiva, that his mind should be there. Having a phone is splitting your head. You're elsewhere as well. The Rebbe gave much simpler examples that are mushla, that are ugefrekt by a boy in yeshiva. For that, he has to know that you're genuine, as Rabbi Blau said, and believe, Taka, that a Bacher in yeshiva is meant to be, or a boy in cheder. Now is your time. Reishis Arisa Seichem La Hashem. Now is the time that you're meant to be fully immersed in learning, and splitting your head and having always that thought, maybe I'm getting information on maybe I'm being someone's trying to get a hold of me, and maybe I can, it opens a world of options, as well as the concept of yichud. You know that the Torah says that ein apotrapos la rayos. Chazal and Gemara say there's no apotrapos la rayos. Be honest and tell him. There's nobody that can get around such a thing. But for all these things, you have to be super honest. This is obviously, again, assuming, like Rabbi Blau assumed, that's a question from a starting off, like a child that's at the beginning. Bereshis Darkei. I'm gonna. Sure, please.
Okay, just for one pointer over here. I find many times when I talk to parents and children sitting together, trying to come up with a downtime, whether it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, the child is giving resistance because the child is saying, what if it's Motzei Shabbos and I want to have that extra hour? What if it's a Sunday? And the usual answer that really settles with the child is, listen, I'm home, I'm with you, I'm here to help you. I'm not running away. So whatever we do, we could always change things. And that itself calms the child down that they could accept on themselves extra restrictions.
Oh yeah, super helpful. Okay, so next question I'm going to share. This is to David Churba. Should fast-paced and highly stimulating content be avoided altogether, or is it okay in moderation? And if so, what would moderation look like?
It's a very difficult question. Well, I'm sure the doctor has a lot to say about this. Do you put that child through something like that? I'll just tell you personally, I have Tavito. If my children want to see sometimes Tavito or video or even Chabad.org, during COVID, I use that almost every day. That was the place to go. We'll give them something to watch, on a Sunday, what might. However, my child came over to me once and tells me, listen, I want to go to mostly music because Tovido, I almost watched everything. At that point, I said, okay, I think I got the message. And I actually took the computer out of the house and I said, we're not having any computers at home because I find what's going to happen if the mostly music is also finished up. The next option is Netflix. Next option is Hulu. And that's where, for sure, we don't want them to go. So once we're in that, in that hole, I feel it's just going to get, there are times that we need to do this, understood, and it should be in proportion of how much time, but everything has to be carefully implemented and watched over that they don't take advantage. One more last thing. I told my children, you can watch Tovido for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes, I'm closing the computer. I came at 29 minutes, and my children told me, listen, it's another minute. So I came back a minute and a half later. It was already too late. They were on to the next video, and it's only 5 minutes now. So things just go and go, and they'll sit there for an hour and a half, no problem. So just understand the nature of where things just go.
Yeah, I got that question, and this is the danger of being a therapist. Two people see the same word and they have a completely different understanding of it. So the highly stimulating content, I don't know the app that you're referring to, Vito, or music, but to me, when I hear highly stimulating, I'm thinking like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, which maybe no one here heard of it, but I will tell you with certainty that the teens that are coming to me are playing that stuff. These are internet video games that essentially the way to win is the more people that you kill, rob, or steal from, the more you win. And if you think that this is something that the community is insulated from, that is a very big mistake. I write this in my book. This is a true story. I had a father come to me. I was seeing the kid was 12 at the time. And it was right before Pesach. The father came in for a collaborative session, and he said, Dr. Orgenbaum, I have a question. This thing about stealing the afikoimim is a good chinuch or not? Maybe we're not really sending such a good message, stealing things. And I said, Rabbi so-and-so, as insofar as this is a hashkafa question, speak to your Rav. But if you're asking me my psychological advice, let me tell you that your son is playing Grand Theft Auto. And if it's chinuch that you're worried about, I would start there. Do you understand what these games are? Do you understand what the content is? That is, when you say stimulating content, that is what I hear. Now, if you think that, in my days when I grew up, we had a Nintendo Entertainment System and a Sega Genesis, or if you're even younger, we had these handheld video games, only the kids played it. The research has showed that only it used to be an underage, they estimate that 1 in 10 US gamers now are under the age of 20. Right now, the average age of people playing video games is close to 35 years old. And this is not just in the non-Jewish community. This is happening here. Wives are calling and they're saying, my husband comes home, he needs to relax, and they engage until 3 in the morning playing these video games. So when we talk about fast pace, if that's what you meant, well then, I'll leave it to you to decide whether this is something that should be avoided altogether or not. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, this leads straight into the next question. One second, Robert. One second.
I'll just add one thing, and I agree fully with everything that's said, but I actually want to just point out one piece. And this is where everyone has to make a personal decision. You mentioned, as your children, Tovido and this, you took the computer out of the house. So again, that could be a super solution that worked in your case. For other people, one of the ways, and going back to my other question, one of the ways that we prevent our children from getting a phone, or by always going to the neighbor's house, which has unfiltered internet, is actually by having a computer in the house and by giving it certain, setting up a framework of time limits, restrictions. So let's say the 30-minute actual resident, we have a 30-minute rule about certain things. And in other words, technology. And I know there's people that have a much stronger rule. I have a sister that technology is only on Friday. But what's common, and that's what I'm saying, everybody's got to pick their thing and what works and can always revisit it and can always change it. That's very true. But the idea, and this goes back to the highly stimulating is going to be something different for every person. But what I find is that we need to be honest with ourselves. There are different things that are stimulating. So let's just say, for a person, he's not a gamer and but he finds it very stimulating to catch up on all current events. Okay, today with the filters, it's not just about filtering out the darkest sides of the internet or the most highest stimulating game. Putting certain time limits you can have with Apple set in there that your browser goes off after 15 minutes. So you have your 15 minutes, it's gonna go off, and there's a way to ask Apple for one more minute. But Apple built that in, psychological thing. You can ask for one more minute, and after that you need to go back to the password holder. But putting time restrictions in place definitely is a way to kind of put certain balance. And on one hand, your children don't feel they're deprived from everything, and on the other hand, they feel like, okay, there's a seder over here. It's not all breaking loose.
Thank you so much. I want to point out from what we're hearing over here from Rabbi Blau and Rabbi David and from Rabbi Shalom, you really need to know, like at that point in life, it's Pashut sitting down and studying how computer works, and how the apps work. Believable, like Rabbi Blau, to sit down and figure out an Apple phone and know that it's something, figure out in order for his son to be able to walk. You really need to get into lumdus of it. Was tut man for chinuch?
I have a confession to make. Compliment isn't honest. I've been an early adapter of technology. Probably one of the first Apple trios or whatnot runs in our genes. Somehow we connect to technology and understand how technology works. So I don't get a big compliment. It's not my mysterious nefesh for chinuch, but I do believe that all of us as parents don't have a luxury to just say, okay, I don't understand technology. If you're not going to understand technology, your children are going to understand it better than you want them to understand it.
At least they say you're a go-to, if you have any questions. Okay, next question is going to be directed to the doctor, Dr. Shalom, and it actually continues from where you left off. How can we as parents better educate? How do we give children oisius, or give parents oisius to discuss with their children about addictive online content? How do we explain our children in a way that they can understand it?
Okay, so just to clarify when you use the word addiction, and this is really important, we throw words around, and it's part of the common vernacular to say addiction, or trauma is another big one. When I hear addiction, when therapists, professionals hear addiction, we're thinking very clinically, we're thinking about the DSM, do they check off these criteria or not? We're talking about someone that has a very, very serious problem that is impacting all the domains of their life, their biological, their psychological, their social, their spiritual. We're talking about, I assume the question is just, you're finding that your child is slowly or surely spending more and more time with technology, and as a parent, what can we do to educate them and maybe have them understand perhaps some of the concerns that a parent may have in a way that is gentle and soft, and that the child doesn't feel like you're pushing them away, and the parent doesn't feel guilty, oh my gosh, I ruined my relationship with my child. That's the question.
Is that authoritative, but...
Yes, I did mention that. So there's a couple of things. I mean, there was a story with the great Rosh Hashiva and Musar ethicist Rabbi Elio Dessler, the machaber of the Sefer Michtav Melio, which is a fabulous Musar Sefer, very, very famous. Anyway, one night he originally learned in Kelm. He got smicha from Rabbi Chaim Moshe Grudzansky, who was considered the Gadol Hadar at the time in Lithuania. Anyway, he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He was the Rosh Hashiva there, and he had a young Talmud by the name of Rabbi Moshe Shapira. And one night, who was living in his house, and one night Rabbi Dessler saw this young Moshe Shapira reading poetry. So he said, Moshe, instead of reading poetry, I want to introduce you to something called the Maharal. And what he did was, he took something which was a talent or an inclination of young Moshe. He was drawn towards poetry. It's prose and all that. And he channeled it into, he took it away, but he replaced it with something else. So the first thing is, if you're talking to your child about limiting technology, stopping technology, spending more time playing ball, that's what we did in my days. I mean, then you have to realize that if you're going to create a void, if you're going to limit technology, remove technology, the laws of physics state that if there's a void, it's going to automatically be filled with something else. So make sure that, number one, you fill it with something else. But even more fundamentally, you have to know your child. This is really, really important. And knowing one child doesn't mean that you know your other child. Each child is a unique constellation in temperament, personality. And so what you're looking to do is you're trying to say, you could allow technology, you could prohibit it, but at the same time, what are the talents? What are the strengths? What are the yearnings, the potential of my child? And let me connect them with something that speaks to that, whatever it might be. It could be learning, or it could be something that's martial arts, whatever it might be. For boys, playing ball. For girls, music, dance, cooking, baking. I mean, the world's the limit. Be creative. So there's that. What else will come up? Listen, I certainly encourage ball. I don't know what happened in my days. That's what we used to do. It became like a lost art. But certainly activities where they're moving, where they're moving around, they're not just sitting. Other things that would come, I think that's it for now. I think that's important. Those are important things. Know your child. If you're taking something away, make sure to replace it with something productive that speaks to their talent. Anyone else have any ideas, or I'll come up with something?
I'll just add.
Yeah.
That music is for girls. I find many boys today that are connecting to music. I'll also mention an interesting conversation I had with a parent a few months ago. They felt their child was already at a point very strongly connected and I call the word addicted, dependent, and kind of relying on technology to fill X amount of hours. Child is not a super studious child, and just telling him to go play ball, he's not interested. So the parent actually got the child, again, this worked for, like you say, each child is their own constellation. The parent got the child a 3D printer. The child was brilliant in working computers, but instead of being online, a big part of the issue with the internet, with technology in general, is almost, in other words, is like this passive thing of like, I'm going to do nothing and entertain me, right? Show me a video, act everything out, read everything. So something that requires stimulation, even if it isn't moving. Moving is very healthy, and there's no question. But there are some boys that they're not super athletic, right? So, okay, can we get movement somewhere else? Can we get mental cognitive movement where there's something more engaging than just sitting down and like, okay, let's watch, let the time pass, etc. Reading, scrolling. So the 3D printer, I've seen it been adopted more in houses. There's many other types of ideas. And again, each one, look at it, try to negotiate your best outcome. Try to negotiate your best outcome. Know your child, and think of a creative solution of how you're going to fill that time. But that point that you're making of like just taking something away, you can't just, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're not going to be happier with what the next thing is fills the void.
Yeah. I think also educating a child on Gadol Koicha Malacha, of actually being productive. Children learn to Daled Vehei. The reason why a ox is Daled, because it's working. Okay. Or just to add also to fill into what Reb Shalom said. They say that someone came into Yechidus and told the Rebbe, explained, he said, I educated all my children in the same way. I don't understand why this child came out different. The Rebbe said, embedded in your question is the answer. How do you educate all the children the same way? A lot about stopping and noticing each child, his needs and his talents and his tendencies and what he would be pulled to.
I always say, Chanoch l'nar al pi darkoi is not if you have different children. Of course it is. You have to parent each child in their unique way. But even the same child, you can't parent your child who's 4 or 6 when they turn 10 the same way that they were when they were 4. And then when they turn 17, the stages of development bring out different parts and different aspects of themselves. Parenting is not a static activity, it's dynamic. And that's part of the challenge of parenting. So, yeah.
Back to the Siyata Dishmaya and the davening. Next question, I'm going to direct to Rabbi Blau. And again, these questions these are the questions we got, and they bring up various topics, obviously, organized in a way that would present the whole concept. My kid got an MP3 player for Hanukkah. I guess was gifted by someone else. Should I let him have it, or are all devices harmful?
Question. So, two ways to go about it. All devices are not harmful, but every device needs a careful consideration. So, I don't know, when you say the kid, I don't know what age are we talking about, and I don't know what's on the MP3 player, and what type of MP3 player is it. So in other words, an MP3 player can be used very well. Parents can buy their child an MP3 player, preparing for the bar mitzvah, and they can hear recordings of the Maimar. There are boys that learned 12 Prakim Tanya by having an MP3 player with some recordings where they heard, sing songs in the Prakim Tanya. MP3 player can be amazing. At the same time, MP3 players aren't innocent. Often today, MP3 players have multiple features that create certain concerns. Maybe the tech expert will know better than me, but I'll just mention what I'm aware of. Okay, many MP3 players today have much more technology than they used to have, but we'll go through some of the things. They connect to Wi-Fi. Many of them have a browser, or the ability to have a browser. So like, I'm gonna use an example where there's like an innocent device, you go on Amazon MP3 player, okay, Timku, one of the top results. Well, Timku MP3 players, most of the time, they're MP4 players that are really Google Android phones, right? That the only thing they're not is they don't have a cellular cell inside them and they don't have a number. But for all practical purposes, it's a full Android OS system and has a browser, and it does not have all the other safeguards in place for the filtering. So those devices is literally, well, would you give your child a smartphone in 3rd grade? So why are you giving him a Timku? And the parent that thinks that, okay, but we don't have Wi-Fi at home. Wi-Fi exists almost everywhere, and the children know how to get it. I was in Shul when meet a child, amazing child in our school, from an amazing family, like showing me, like fun, like, okay, the Wi-Fi in the Shul was off, so the browser Google has, like there's a game that you can play. And he was showing the kids the game. What was, in other words, to me it was alarming. Okay, he's a little child, he's holding a device with a Chrome browser, it's officially just an MP3 player, and he's playing the game because the Wi-Fi in the Shul is off today. That's problematic. At the same time, now let's go to a few other very quick technical things. Sometimes you have, and again, this is more in the older ages, where a lot of these devices have Bluetooth. So you have a lot of file swapping and file sharing. So you think you loaded up the device and you kept it clean and you know exactly what's on there. 3 months later, whatever you put on there may not be there, and there may be a whole lot of other swaps that took place over Bluetooth, over wires. So to some degree, I think, in other words, if you're going to give your child an MP3 player, just buy it carefully. Buy the right one, the one that suits your standards, the one that's you're actually going to be able to know what's on it. Some people will choose to give a 24/6, but 24/6, again, for some other people, 24/6 is also too open. You can do a 24/6 with certain restrictions. What type of playlist, what type of profile on it. So, like I said, and I think almost every answer, there's going to be a lot of nuanced details about it. Short answer, if you're looking for like the black and white things, no, MP3s are not bad, neither are they good. It's all about what you're going to make of it.
Quick recommendation, they have today, they're selling MP3s with a hechsher. If you look at the hechsher, they're taking out the video, they're taking out Bluetooth sharing, but yes, Bluetooth to the AirPods, and you could rest assured you're not getting onto the internet. And by the way, to what Rabbi was saying, Timku, On the box, when you buy the Timco from Amazon for like $29, it says on it, no Wi-Fi. So be careful when you're going online for that.
Okay, and all that is coupled with what was said earlier. It's all about relationship and everything you invested in and invested in this child for all those years. When you come to pull it out, only based on the 80-20. I mean, where we're striving. Next question to Reb David Shurba. My kids struggle to put away their devices during family times, like dinner. How do I encourage them to engage with the family and minimize their screen time during these moments? This is assuming they didn't put boundaries in place.
Right. So just an interesting point. Somebody told me that in his house, they have certain rooms that they have technology, and certain rooms there is no technology. Bedroom, there should not be any technology. Dining room table, no technology. If you want to go to the den, more than welcome. Some people could actually do such, implement that. And that's, again, with understanding what the doctor was mentioning, how to implement. But there is a concept like that. And secondly, if you do the screen time, it could work for you. You don't have to always put up a big fight. I don't like when I hear parents and children are always struggling. If you do the proper things at the right time with the right mahalach, it shouldn't be. If a child is over addictive, then there's other questions you have to address, and it's really a symptom. It's not the problem. Why is that child on the phone not talking to the parent? That's sometimes more of an alarming question than why is a child on the phone not talking to the parent. So the concept is there's more brewing in that child, and a lot has to be fixed. So
I just want to add to this. Good point. There's research. Research distinguishes between what we call activity constraints, such as the question we were asking children. Let's say, actually, not in the case that you're giving. Activity constraints would be like, you can't go on to certain social media. You have your phone, or you can't use certain language if you are texting people. So these are activity constraints. The research shows that kids are much more receptive to restraints or rules when it comes to activities, but context constrictions, such as you are not allowed to use your cell phone during supper. You're not allowed to use your cell phone during vacation. You're not allowed to use your cell phone during Shabbos. These are actually a lot more difficult for children to hold back from. The fact that they have to be without their phone for an entire chunk of time makes it very difficult for them, and it's much more difficult for parents to enforce. So we will see a lot of this. If your kids have access to technology, certain contexts, supper, lunch, whatever the case is, will be more difficult to enforce. It's important to understand that, because that will give you a little bit more compassion and not get frustrated right away. Realize this is not just your own child. This is a universal issue. And so you could approach it with a little bit more mindfulness and intention instead of just getting upset right away. It's an important point. Yeah.
I could just relate to something Shalom said, more alarming, the fact that the child doesn't want to be focused and in the moment with the parent. This, I think, relates a little bit to what Reb Shalom was saying earlier, what Dr. Ogerman was saying earlier, that...
Reb Shalom's fine. I'll go with that.
Yeah. I used it. Okay. So something Reb Shalom brought up earlier, that it's a lot about personal example. If when you're with the child, you're not fully there, and then all of a sudden when you're eating supper and that's the time that you're making yourself available, it's going to be hard for a child all of a sudden to be more righteous than you. And it's avoida for all of us. Next question is going to be directed to the doctor. And this is already, I think this is the $1 million question. Parents that either didn't put restrictions in place, or their children are already struggling and had a taste. How do we, let me read it in the Lashon here, how do we have the conversation without putting, if possible, the least possible strain on the relationship? And let me read it the way it's written here. What are effective strategies for transitioning children away from highly online content to more educational or calming alternatives without creating conflict or resistance? How can I put a filter restriction on my teenagers' phones when they already experienced having one? that definitely doesn't feel very loving to from a teen's perspective.
That's to me. That's a very long question.
Right.
Okay, so just if you could
To
just repeat
summarize it.
the
To summarize it, a child already experienced having a phone without a filter. A child is already steeped in a specific, I guess, style of usage of the internet, whether it's time, whether it's content, and now we're trying to pull back, which is always harder. How do we do that without, as much as possible, without straining the relationship?
Okay. It's a good question. It touches on several areas of concern. Let me give it some context. So first of all, I'm reminded of something that Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, known as the Kotzker Rebbe, once said, very, very sharp line. He said that a child is a lamp to be kindled, not a vessel to be filled. And what he meant by that, my understanding, is that it's not enough to just pour information into a child. Rather, the belief is that a child has a spark, and that spark contains all the goodness and all the potential in and of itself, and it's our job as parents to just simply kindle the spark and the rest will follow. That's my understanding of the Kotzker Rebbe's statement. However, I do believe the Kotzker Rebbe did not live in the age of the internet. And I believe, I'd like to say, Lefi ani es daiti, if the Kotzker Rebbe was alive today, he would probably say something like, a child is a lamp to be kindled and a vessel to be filled. Because if we don't fill our children with proper information that is founded on Torah true values, on Torah true hashkafa, on spirituality, they're going to get their information from another source, the internet. And let me tell you, the internet is not the best place to be getting your information from, particularly around intimacy and relationships. And if you think that children are not getting their information from there, then come to me in privately after, and I will tell you hundreds of stories of people from wonderful, wonderful communities that have brought their children to me. So this is a mandate. This is part of the relationship that you have to have with your child if technology is involved, and it involves conversations. Children are curious by nature, and if you're not going to have the conversations that are developmentally appropriate, that means the things that they're curious about during the specific ages that they are at, if they're not going to hear it from their parents, they're going to do whatever they can to get it from any other source. So the first thing is, the question was, what do we do in terms of trying to slowly move children from unfiltered internet access to filtered without threatening the relationship? I don't think that that's possible. I think that you're going to have a child that's going to automatically protest. You're taking something which was more or less a feel-good drug, and now you're restricting it. And like any person that stops doing something that's highly pleasurable, so the dopamine now is stopping, there's going to be withdrawal symptoms. And those will come out in terms of behaviors, protests, resistance, anger, and whatnot. But if you stick with it, and you show your intention, and you have honest conversations about why you're doing so, not because you don't trust them, because you don't trust the internet, not because you don't like them, but because your job as a parent is to protect them, to make sure that they don't go down a rabbit hole and, God forbid, end up in a place where they can't pull themselves out of. If these are the conversations that you're encouraging in your home, one parent, both parents, then your child will eventually understand that this is coming from a place of love, this is coming from a place of genuine concern, and that'll be hopefully the beginning of a new relationship with technology that doesn't get in the way of the parent-child relationship.
David.
Very nice, very well, thank you. I'd just like to mention, sometimes I have children graduating high school, and they say, take off my filter. I'm done with school, I'm done with my filter, I want everything and anything. And I asked them, like, what was it in school that you wanted that you weren't getting on your phone? And it might be a Snapchat, it might be something like not that serious. I mean, Snapchat is serious, but it's not as serious as unfiltered and going to the schmutz and the crazy stuff. We're talking about simple things. And sometimes if we find out with that conversation, what the doctor was saying, that listen, let's find out what do you really need and what do you want, and we'll just block everything else. You'll be surprised that your children are good, and all they wanted that little extra thing, and if you promise them that we'll keep it, they have no problem putting on a filter.
Thank you. I think we always need to come from the premise and the truth that our children are good, and that brings it out of them even stronger. Thank you so very much. We're going to reach the close, and we want to wrap up by 10. So we're going to turn to each one of our Chashva panelists and ask for their closing remarks. And there's been a request from the crowd if it could include what you find as your most effective and personal strategy for you in your home to help your family and maybe your extended family with the technology challenge. We'll start with Mendel.
Thank you. So I think in a closing remark, if I had to say, there was so many more questions that came in that weren't answered. So for all of those people, what I would like to just suggest is I hope some of what was shared tonight gave a level of clarity or something to begin forming a mahalach. But if not, feel free to reach out to anyone over here. But really, you'll be surprised how many people have something to share and to brainstorm together. It could be your own siblings. It could be your son's menahel, your son's rebbe. But one thing you'll always find is you reach out to people. People are happy to help, to share, to collaborate. That's point number one. Point number two, you asked about, in other words, what is, maybe in my personal experience, what did I find most effective or what do I use? So I think it's a valuable question, and it's probably not going to be the same for every single person. But I found a few things. Number one, we use a combination of, in our house, we use a filter on the entire home, which means any device in the house runs through our personal device that we use is an Amazon Eero. It's fairly cheap device. It costs about $10 a month to pay for a membership to a filter. What the filter allows you to do, let me just explain it in really simple layman's terms, but it allows you to create in very easy way different profiles. So you take the devices, every device to get onto this internet, whether it's plugged in or it's Wi-Fi, is only able to get its internet through this Eero. It has to be set up right. Once it's set up right, you're going to have different profiles. So for example, the cameras systems in my house, right, in other words, all of those are on one profile because they have no internet to them. They just need to be able to access whatever it is, or the intercom system. But for the other device of the house, we generally have two profiles. I have what I call the parents profile, and I have the family profile. By default, everything is on the family profile. The family profile takes out all things like gaming or whatever it is. You can have a whitelist. It's up to you to decide how restrictive you want to make it. But my point is, let me just get to another piece over here, is that besides that you can choose certain categories and you can whitelist something and you can blacklist something, you can move a device from profile to profile as necessary. So if my children will come to me and say, hey, Ta, something isn't working, we're trying to reach a certain website, well, if they need it on a permanent basis, I will, happily add it to the whitelist. If it's just on the fly, I can do it from my phone. I can be in my office. My wife can do it as well. Just move the profile and open it up. It gives them their thing. The less, when we show people, in other words, when things aren't overly difficult to overcome when they need it, there's less resistance for it in the house. The other piece that I would say is very valuable about the Eero is the fact that it has time things. So you can set that the devices, in other words, going back to Rabbi Cherba's piece, will manage technology with technology. I'm not saying that Eero is the best. Could be Rabbi Cherba knows of much better devices. But what I found with the Eero is you can say, these devices should shut off at this time. These devices should only turn on, later. Some parents struggle that their children are supposed to go to the bus in the morning, but they think that there are 15 minutes of technology they want it in the morning. So you can say, no, not in the morning, not in the morning. But what happens if your children are already older? They're going, setting up your house. Okay, technology doesn't turn on in the morning. No one needs it. In the morning, you get dressed, you go out to the bus. It's going to turn on automatically later in the evening or on a Friday or whatever it is. You can kind of use technology to set up your standards how you want it, and you can tinker with it accordingly. The other piece is I definitely have, in addition to the Eero, which will filter everything going on in the house, I have personal filters I have on my phone, and I use the same combination. There are general filters, and then there are time filters. I don't want my browser an entire day. My browser is going to time out after X amount of minutes. And it creates a certain level of restriction, a basic discipline. Now, could I go to the desktop for longer? I could. I do believe that there's a very big difference between the challenge of the general computer poses and the challenge of just something that's in your hand wherever you go, be it in the restroom, the hallway, in the couch, wherever it is, and thinking about the restrictions that you want to pose on your cell phone. Even if it means that's going to force you to the desktop, I would rather that push me to the desktop than have it on my phone all day long.
Thank you, Shakayach. Now I'll move to the doctor, Dr. Ogerbaum.
Sure. So it's been said that technology is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. You asked, what is the most effective thing that I am proud of? And I was thinking about that in the 2 minutes that you asked the question. I think I could say with full confidence that, like everything in this world, technology is no different. It's a relationship. The relationship that we have with our phones, with our computers, with the internet. I'm proud to say I think the most effective thing in my house is that my children know, without a doubt, that my relationship with them and their relationship with me is infinitely more stronger and more important and more of a priority than it is with technology or internet. They will never see me when they're talking to me with my phone, and if they do, I will let them know, excuse me for 1 minute, I'm just expecting an important phone call, or I have to just, in the middle of an email, let me just finish, and then the phone is put away, or the laptop is put down. And that, to me, I think I'm very, very proud of that, and that has been most effective, because my kids know at the end of the day that their father's relationship for them and love for them is not superseded by technology. And it's really, really important. Remember, kids, they see things and they interpret it in a very interesting way. If a parent is taking a phone to bed, just think about that, what that is. That is a very, the bed is a very intimate place. And you're bringing your phone and everything that's contained in it into your bed. That says something, at least in a kid's mind, or certainly a teenager's mind. In conclusion, I just want to end with this. There was very similar to the story that you said with your own kids. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful story. Dr. David Pelkowitz tells of the time when he was giving a lecture to a group of parents who had children who were facing chronic cognitive and physical challenges. And in the audience, a father raised his hand and he shared the following story, which happened to the father the previous Pesach. And I'm going to read it to you. He said that his eldest daughter, 19 years old, seemed very intent on stealing the afikomen that Pesach. And the father said, I was kind of disappointed that in my daughter. She's 19. She should really be mature enough to allow her siblings to get the prize. Inevitably, the 19-year-old was successful. And when the time came to negotiate for her father for her afikomen present, she asked that he take her out on Wednesday night, leave his smartphone at home, and spend 4 uninterrupted hours with her. And the father said to the crowd, he said, I saw this as an opportunity to reconsider the way I related to my children. I had lost sight of the fact that my children felt abandoned by his smartphone use. And ever since then, I make it a regular practice to take my children out, making sure to leave my phone at home. And he ended off, I feel lucky that my daughter hadn't given up on me and was still willing to give me another chance. And so my concluding thoughts to you is, our children are always waiting and always willing to give us a second, a third, a fourth chance. Sometimes it's as clear as a bell, like in the case of Dr. Pelkowitz's story. Other times it's not as clear. Our children will protest, they'll scream, they'll yell, they'll resist, they'll fight. And in those moments, it's our job to hear what they're really crying out for. And so, if there's one thing to take away from this, is that there is definitely a time and a place to talk about Sor Meira. It's important to understand the threat and the damage and the danger of the internet. But what we're suggesting here tonight is also Aseh Tov. Create a vision of your child and each child of what you'd like them to be, how you'd like them to grow. And in that model and in that vision, convey it to your children, and then figure out how does internet get in the way of or benefit or advance that vision? I'll end off with the following story about my Rebbe, Reb Moshe Weinberger, Shlita, the Rav of Eish Kodesh, named after the Piasetzner Rebbe in the Five Towns. And he tells the story that when he was a young child, his parents were moving to Israel, to Eretz Yisrael. And they finally moved, I think they settled in Tel Aviv near a very big soccer stadium. And it was Shabbos afternoon, and the Weinbergers, young Moshe's at the table, they're singing Shabbos Miras. And there's a soccer game going on there on Shabbos, and someone must have scored a goal. And so half the crowd is cheering for the team that they're rooting for, and the other crowd is cursing and in Ivrit. And young Moshe understands Hebrew, and he understands they're saying really not nice things. And Rebbetzin, his mother, Rebbetzin Weinberg, who didn't understand Hebrew, said, "Isn't Eretz Yisrael beautiful? Everyone is singing. Listen to the music." And so Reb Moshe Weinberger said that most people hear ugly. It's our job to hear the music. And so the only way that we're going to be able to continue the relationship with our children is to make sure that even when they're screaming and protesting, we're always listening to the music. It begins with gatherings of Hebraians like this. So thank you for participating. That's all I got.
Reb David Sherber, thank you,
I
Doctor.
think we're out of time, but I'll try to make it quick. Just a couple points. Number one, I would say like this. I know as parents, we're going to try our best to really implement and talk and have a conversation and try our best to make the best negotiations and get the most out of, to keep our children safe. But in case we're let down and the children don't follow 100% or not even 50%, we should still be proud of them, and we should realize that, or possibly think, maybe I didn't assess the situation 100%, and for that child, it's really 100%, maybe 200%, and they're coming such a long way, and give them that satisfaction that you're still happy with them, because they still want to have that parental buy-in. Another point is, if chas v'shalom you see and you dig and you find there is stuff that really shouldn't be there, and the child really is not where you want them to be, they probably need professional help. And at that point, maybe take yourself out of the picture and hand it over to the right professionals, because it could be very overbearing on a parent's heart of what's really going on, that child is doing on the sideline. So the concept is sometimes we need to be active parents, and sometimes we have to bring in the right people into the picture. And one last thing is that the filters out there, Baruch Hashem, came a very long way. Gentech is in the hallway. There's TechLock, there's NetSpark. They came a very long way. Today, it's probably the best ever. They're always updating servers. The mila of having a Jewish filter made by from people for from people is that the features that they have is really designed for us. They have keyword searches that they know which words should not be even able to come with any results. They have skin shading on pictures, images that are explicit, masks the pictures. We don't have to see every single one of those pictures. And the idea is that they made it for the from people. So the concept is that these are filters that really came over 7 years, a very long way, and they invested millions of dollars into it. It's kedai to try it, to work with it. It's 24-hour support, and it's something that I really feel is like the main, a very strong point where a person should, every device, like the Rabbi Blau, has something on that device protecting it, whether it's a filter, whether it's a block, whether it's limitations, but it shouldn't be overlooked. I'll give you homework to do if you don't mind. Take out a pen and paper tonight, mark down on that piece of paper every single device you have in the house and how is it protected. Many times after doing such inventory, you'll see, oh, I have extra 5 devices. Some are sitting in the drawer. Some are just around, just not being used. Not every device has to stay home. You could take it back to work, get rid of it, because we don't want those devices that we don't have anything on just because they're not being used to be the michshel for the children. And one last thing is, there are children getting hold of maids' phones And that's where the problem might lie. So the concept is to do a full circle, and Hashem should give you siyata shmaya in everything you do, and thank you for letting me share my thoughts.
Shakar, I want to add, if I could also wrap up with two thoughts. First of all, for those of us in the crowd that are like me, that are not very tech savvy, and we're hearing about filters and a whole bunch of lot of options, and we're just getting maybe flustered or overwhelmed. So I want to share for that reason what I do in my house. I have a tag filter on my phone, but on the computer I paid somebody to come and to make users for the kids that have no internet, mine that has internet, the parents' user that has internet, and it's filtered by tag on the same program. And if a kid, and they could do whatever they want on their users, they could draw on Pachka and move their files and pictures and feel like $1 million. And if they need internet, they can come. Again, it depends obviously on an environment, it depends. And I want to add one more thing. The doctor gave a beautiful, beautiful ending thoughts. And I want to add just one thing that will help in terms, and this has been from my experience with dealing with parents and Bachram as well more recently. There's another, in addition to the relationship and that loving and spending time and knowing that you're there for them and they're infinitely more valuable in your life than anything else going on in your life. In addition to that, there's an importance, a tremendous importance for the boys, girls, for your children to know, and specifically the teens, that you work on yourself, that you don't believe you're Muslim, you work on yourself as well. Because when they know that, they'll accept what you challenge them on. Some people, if you portray the picture of a perfect chassid, a perfect father, perfect whatever, tzaddik, so then when you're challenging them, in their mind, you're not, they can challenge you. And when they see you're honest, you're bemis authentic, and you work on your things, you have your hagbalas, you put your filter, you're ready to share, at least by Chassidusha, for bringing on Shabbos things that are hard for you. So then when you come to them with things that are hard, they can relate. They know that they could be makabel from you, and no is an answer that you can hear and understand that they're also working on. So there's in addition to, I don't want it to take away, I want to finish off with the chiyuv that has been described over here, and the positive vision that we all want to be really focused on for our homes, investing in the chiyuv. So then when we have to deal with these type of challenges, it's like Rabbi Blau said, it's the 20 as opposed to the 80. Yeshakar for all of us for making it out tonight. I'm sure Chazak al Tamol Sheina Chazar Sreika Machsidisha for bringing Kenuftan, and we should continue davening. We to this galus now. Thank you.